You walk through the world believing you're rational, logical, that your financial position is the inevitable result of merit, effort, and circumstance. But you're not observing the game, you're playing it blind. And the rich know something you don't. They understand that poverty isn't a condition. It's a thought pattern. It's a way of relating to money that keeps you perpetually outside the circle. Here's the brutal truth. Your bank account is merely a reflection of your inner architecture. The thoughts you think, the beliefs you hold, the automatic patterns running in your subconscious. These are the real currency. Most people are broke not because the system is rigged against them, though it certainly is, but because they've internalized scarcity. They move through life like animals flinching from predators, always defending, always protecting what little they have, never expanding into abundance. The wealthy operate in a completely different psychological dimension. They don't think about money the way you do. When you see $1, you see survival. You see rent, groceries, the monthly anxiety of making it to payday. When a rich person sees $1, they see a tool. They see an instrument of leverage, a seed that can be planted and multiplied. More fundamentally, they see money as a language, a way to communicate with the world, to command resources, to bend reality to their will. This isn't mystical thinking. It's empirical. When you study the wealthy, when you examine their decisions, their conversations, their daily rituals, you discover they're playing by an entirely different set of rules. They've hacked the operating system of capitalism. They understand the mechanics beneath the surface, the invisible architecture that most people spend their entire lives unknowingly serving. You've been taught to chase money, to work harder, to sacrifice, to delay gratification for some mythical future retirement that may never come. The rich don't chase money. Money chases them because they position themselves as the hunters, not the prey. They've cultivated a mindset that attracts wealth the way a magnet attracts metal. And the first step to entering that circle is to understand that the game itself is psychological. Your poverty or your modest middle-class existence isn't the fault of the economy. It isn't the fault of your boss or the political system or your family background. It's the fault of your thinking. Specifically, it's the fault of the thoughts you allow to become invisible, the beliefs you've stopped questioning, because everyone around you shares them. These are the walls of your prison, and the lock has always been on the inside. The wealthy know this. They know that before you can accumulate money, you must accumulate understanding. Before you can command wealth, you must command your own mind. That's where this journey begins. Not with a stock tip or a business plan or a get-rich-quick scheme. It begins here, in the architecture of your consciousness, in the moment you recognize that the life you're living is a direct consequence of the way you think. And if you can change your thinking, everything else follows. The rich don't drift. They don't stumble through life hoping something good happens. They move with the precision of a sniper, always targeting, always calculating. This is the second principle you must master. The art of setting clear financial goals with the kind of specificity that separates the idle dreamers from the ruthless architects of wealth. Most people have goals the way most people have hobbies. They're pleasant distractions, vague desires floating in the background of consciousness. I want to be rich. I want financial security. These aren't goals. These are fantasies, the mental equivalent of wishing on a star. The wealthy, by contrast, have goals that are precise, measurable, crystalline. They know the exact number. They know the timeline. They know the intermediate checkpoints. Here's what separates the two. When a wealthy person sets a goal of $1 million in net worth, they don't just think about the number. They work backward. They calculate the monthly income required. They identify which assets will generate that income. They understand the tax implications, the reinvestment strategy, the timeline for compounding. The goal becomes a map, and the map becomes a pathway that their subconscious can navigate even while they sleep. Your mind is a goal-seeking missile. It's designed by evolution to find targets and move toward them. But if you never get a clear target, it defaults to whatever your environment suggests. It defaults to the goals of your employer, your culture, your family's unexamined assumptions. The rich understand this. They hijack their own neurology. They give their minds a mission so clear, so compelling, so specific that their brain automatically begins to notice opportunities, patterns, and shortcuts that would be invisible to someone without a mission. Consider the difference in daily decisions. A wealthy person considering a new job doesn't ask, will this make me happy? Or, is this a prestigious company? They ask a single question. Does this move me closer to my goal faster than my current path? Everything becomes a calculus. Every choice is either an acceleration or a deceleration. And when you make every decision within this framework, you move with a momentum that most people simply cannot match. The psychological mechanism at work here is what researchers call the reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information. When you set a clear goal, your RAS begins to highlight relevant opportunities. A man who wants to build a real estate empire suddenly notices for sale signs everywhere. He overhears conversations about property management. Articles on real estate appear in his feed. These weren't invisible before. His brain simply wasn't filtering for them. But the moment he set a clear intention, the world reorganized itself around that intention. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is neurology. And the wealthy have understood it for centuries, even before modern science explained the mechanism. They set goals with the kind of clarity that turns the entire apparatus of their mind into a heat-seeking, missile-targeting financial expansion. Most of you are still wandering in the dark, hoping to stumble into wealth, wondering why others seem to find opportunities that you never see. There's a phenomenon you see in wealthy people that you rarely see in the poor. They're never satisfied, not in the neurotic, perpetually anxious way of the middle class, constantly comparing themselves to their neighbors. But in a deeper way, they're fundamentally wired for growth. They understand that standing still in capitalism is actually moving backward. The river is flowing, and if you're not swimming upstream, you're drowning. This is what separates the wealthy from everyone else. A psychological orientation toward learning and improvement that never stops. They read obsessively. They attend seminars. They hire coaches and mentors. They study their own mistakes with the intensity of a surgeon analyzing a failed operation. They're not interested in the false comfort of expertise. They're interested in the edge of incompetence, the frontier where they don't yet know what they're doing, because that's where growth happens. Most people reach a level of competence and then coast. They learn their job, they become proficient, and then they stop learning. They believe that expertise is a destination. The wealthy understand that expertise is a direction, always moving, always refining, always leveling up. They have what psychologists call a growth mindset. But it's more intense than that. It's a compulsion to grow, almost an addiction to self-expansion. This manifests in tangible ways. A wealthy person doesn't look at their salary and think, this is what I can earn. They look at their current income and ask, what skills or assets would I need to double this? They identify the gap. They become obsessed with closing it. They take online courses. They apprentice themselves to someone who's already done what they want to do. They read everything written on the subject. They become a student of their own ambition. And here's the dark truth that no self-help book will tell you. This isn't always pleasant. The growth mindset requires a psychological comfort with discomfort. You must be willing to be incompetent. You must be willing to look stupid. You must be willing to fail repeatedly, publicly, and expensively. Most people find this intolerable. They prefer the psychological safety of knowing what they're doing, even if what they're doing doesn't generate wealth. The wealthy have overcome this psychological barrier. They've learned to love the discomfort of growth. What this means in practical terms is that the wealthy are constantly acquiring new skills, new knowledge, new connections. They're expanding their toolkit, their network, their intellectual capital. While you're watching Netflix, a wealthy person is listening to an audiobook on real estate law or listening to a podcast from someone who's built a billion-dollar company. While you're comfortable in your expertise, they're bleeding into territories where they don't yet have mastery, precisely because that's where the opportunities are. The compounding effect of this over time is staggering. Imagine two people starting with the same income. One maintains the same skill set for 30 years. The other improves by 3% each year. After 30 years, the difference is astronomical. But it's not just the skills that compound. It's the opportunities that come from having skills. It's the relationships that develop with mentors and peers who are also growing. It's the confidence that comes from repeatedly facing your own incompetence and emerging stronger. Now we arrive at the point where most financial advice becomes useless. Everyone knows you should save money. Everyone has heard the platitude, you must spend less than you earn. But this is where the wealthy think completely differently, because they understand that saving is not wealth building. Saving is merely not losing. It's the opposite of wealth. It's the psychological pattern of scarcity encoded into a financial behavior. A wealthy person doesn't save money the way you do. They don't put aside a small percentage of their income and watch it grow slowly in a savings account earning 0.03% interest. That's a strategy of the poor, and it guarantees that you'll stay poor, just slightly less anxious than before. The wealthy have a completely different relationship with the money they earn. Here's the distinction. The rich separate their income into categories, and each category has a completely different purpose. Some portion goes to sustaining life, food, shelter, utilities, but the vast majority of their focus is on the portion that will be deployed. This is the difference between saving and investing. Saving is money hidden in the mattress, slowly losing value to inflation. Investing is money put to work, generating returns, multiplying itself. But before you can invest, you must create what wealthy people call margin. Margin is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. It's the psychological and financial breathing room that allows you to make intelligent decisions instead of desperate ones. Most people have negative or minimal margin. They live right up to their income. A slight disaster, a medical emergency, a job loss, an unexpected expense, and their entire financial structure collapses. The wealthy create massive margin, not because they're ascetic or because they deny themselves pleasure, but because they understand that margin is the most valuable asset they possess. Margin creates options. Margin creates the psychological space to see opportunities that the desperate can't see. A man with no margin can't quit his job, even if a far better opportunity appears, because he has rent due next week. A man with 6 months of expenses saved can walk away when opportunity calls. This is where the real wealth building begins. You create margin by becoming ruthless about expenses, not in the way normal financial advice suggests. Cutting out lattes and taking shorter showers. That's not serious wealth building. That's the financial equivalent of a placebo. No, what wealthy people do is examine their spending and ask a single question. Does this generate future returns? A car is an expense. A car that gets you to a job that pays the bills is an expense. A car that's a status symbol is a pure drain on capital. Every purchase becomes evaluated through the lens of capital multiplication. If you're going to spend money, the wealthy ask, will this investment compound? Will it generate income? Will it appreciate? Will it provide a skill or connection that creates future opportunities? If the answer is no, the purchase is deeply scrutinized, if not rejected entirely. This creates a feedback loop. As you create margin, you have capital to deploy. As you deploy capital wisely, it generates returns. As returns generate more capital, you can create even more margin, which allows even larger deployments. This is how wealth compounds exponentially, not through saving scraps, but through the disciplined creation of capital that's deployed into asset-generating vehicles. The wealthy understand this instinctively. Most of you are still trying to get rich by clipping coupons and saving money in the bank. There's a fundamental divide in how wealth is created, and it depends entirely on where you place your focus. The wealthy focus obsessively on assets. Everyone else focuses on liabilities, though they usually call them purchases or investments or necessary expenses. This is where the psychology of wealth becomes most ruthlessly apparent, because it requires you to think in a way that's deeply counterintuitive to how you've been raised. An asset generates income. A liability consumes income. This is so simple that most people miss its profound significance. A rental property is an asset. It generates rent. A house you live in is a liability. It generates expenses. A car is a liability. It depreciates and requires maintenance. An equity stake in a business is an asset. It generates dividends. A boat is a liability. It's just a hole in the water you throw money into. The distinction is not about the object itself. It's about whether that object generates a positive cash flow or a negative one. Now, the wealthy understand this distinction and organize their entire financial life around it. They want their money working for them, not against them. They want to acquire assets that will throw off cash flow into perpetuity. Meanwhile, most people spend their lives acquiring liabilities, telling themselves stories about why these liabilities are actually investments or necessities. Consider the narrative around home ownership. You've been sold a story that buying a house is the American dream and that it's an investment. But examine this carefully. A house you live in generates no income. It costs money every single month: property taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities. It appreciates, perhaps, but only in line with inflation. If you'd taken the down payment and invested it in an actual income-generating asset, you would likely be far wealthier. But because everyone around you is also buying a house, because it's socially sanctioned and financially incentivized by the government, you believe you're making a wise choice. The wealthy see through this. They own enough real estate to generate income, rental properties, commercial real estate, land that appreciates. But they don't live in expensive houses. They live modestly because they understand that a house is a consumption item, not an investment. And consumption is the enemy of wealth accumulation. This extends to everything. A wealthy person drives a reliable car, maybe a few years old, paid in cash, not because they can't afford a Mercedes, but because they understand that a car is a depreciating liability. Every dollar spent on a car is a dollar that's not compounding in the stock market or being deployed into a business. The opportunity cost is staggering over a lifetime. What the wealthy do instead is direct their capital toward actual income-generating assets, dividend-paying stocks, bonds, real estate that generates rent, businesses that generate profit, index funds that provide passive income, intellectual property that generates royalties. The form doesn't matter. The principle is everything. Put your capital into things that make money while you sleep. This is why the wealthy get exponentially wealthier while others struggle. Because every dollar is working for them. Every investment generates returns. Those returns are reinvested into more investments. The compounding becomes ferocious. A poor person spends their entire paycheck on liabilities: cars, clothes, dining out, entertainment. Wealthy people spend a modest amount on liabilities and deploy the vast majority of their capital into assets. Over time, the gap becomes unbridgeable. Money is a form of social power, and social power is generated through networks. This is one of the most underappreciated aspects of wealth psychology. The wealthy understand that their network is their net worth, and they invest in their network the way they invest in assets, with the same calculation, the same ruthlessness, the same long-term vision. Most people view their relationships as organic. They make friends. They maintain those friendships out of sentiment or habit, and they rarely think strategically about their social circle. The wealthy see relationships as capital. They understand that the people you know are the doorways to opportunities, to knowledge, to capital, to partnerships that would be impossible to access otherwise. This doesn't mean they're cold or transactional, though there is certainly a transactional element. What it means is that they're intentional about who they spend time with. They understand that your network shapes your thinking, your opportunities, and your possibilities. If everyone in your circle has a net worth of $50,000, that's the ceiling of your worldview. If you surround yourself with people worth millions, your sense of what's possible expands dramatically. The wealthy cultivate relationships with people who are ahead of them, people who are at their level, and people who are behind them that they can mentor. Each serves a purpose. The people ahead of you are mentors and role models who've already solved problems you haven't yet faced. They show you what's possible. The people at your level are peers and collaborators who can combine forces and compound effort. And the people behind you are investments in legacy and in the compounding power of lifting others, because the obligations and opportunities that emerge from having helped others are profound. Beyond this, the wealthy understand that nearly every major opportunity comes through a relationship, a business partner, an investor, a customer, an advisor, a mentor. The deals happen in the rooms where the money already is, and access to those rooms requires that you know someone. This is why the wealthy attend conferences, host dinners, sit on boards, and spend considerable time and money cultivating their network. What this means practically is that the wealthy are constantly thinking about how to add value to their network. They make introductions. They share opportunities. They provide knowledge freely. They create situations where mutually beneficial relationships can form. In doing so, they become nodes in a network of high-achieving people. And nodes and valuable networks have opportunities that isolated individuals simply cannot access. Most people wait until they need something to reach out to their network. By then it's too late. The wealthy are constantly providing value and building relationships when there's no immediate need. They're playing a long game. They understand that the person they help today might be the person who opens an incredible door tomorrow, or 10 years from now. They're not calculating specific returns. They're building social capital. Here's the deeper truth. The wealthy understand that isolation leads to poverty, that try and do everything alone, trusting only yourself, defending your interests fiercely. This leads to limitation. Wealth scales through relationships. Wealth scales through partnerships. Wealth scales through networks. The person operating alone, no matter how brilliant, no matter how hardworking, will never accumulate wealth at the pace of someone embedded in a high-functioning network of mutual support and opportunity. The final principle that separates the wealthy from everyone else is something they rarely discuss, because it's not sexy or easily marketable. It's the capacity to persist through repeated failure, rejection, and loss without breaking. It's the psychological fortitude to keep moving forward when every signal in your environment is telling you to stop. Here's what you need to understand. The road to wealth is not a highway. It's a minefield. You will fail, not once, but repeatedly. You will make decisions that lose money. You will enter ventures that collapse. You will trust people who betray you. You will see opportunities that seem perfect until they fall apart. And if you've built your psychological identity around success, if you've told yourself that you're someone who doesn't fail, then these inevitable failures will break you. The wealthy have a completely different relationship with failure. They expect it. They plan for it. They reframed it from evidence of inadequacy into data. It's information. It's feedback. It's a tuition payment in the school of wealth building. A wealthy person who's lost millions in bad investments doesn't see themselves as a failure. They see themselves as someone who's learned expensive lessons that most people never have the opportunity to learn. This is what separates the survivors from those who quit. When you encounter the inevitable setback, the business venture that doesn't work, the investment that loses value, the opportunity that falls through at the last moment, you have a choice. You can interpret it as a sign that you shouldn't be doing this, that you don't have what it takes, that you should return to the safety of your job and accept middle-class stability. Most people choose this path. It's the psychologically safe choice. Or you can interpret it as an obstacle that's teaching you something you need to learn in order to succeed. That's the path of the wealthy. They don't see setbacks as stops. They see them as redirects. The venture didn't work. What was the lesson? The investment lost value. What did the market teach me? The relationship failed. What do I understand differently now? They maintain forward momentum even when progress becomes invisible. This requires a specific psychological structure. You need what researchers call resilience, the capacity to bounce back from adversity. But more importantly, you need what the wealthy have cultivated: an internal locus of control and an anti-fragile mindset. An internal locus of control means you believe your outcomes are determined by your actions, not by external circumstances. An anti-fragile mindset means you arrange your life and your thinking so that adversity makes you stronger, not weaker. The wealthy also understand something else. Persistence in the face of failure is not evenly distributed. Most people give up after 3 attempts. Some make it to 5 or 10. The wealthy often persist for 15, 20, 50 attempts if necessary. They understand that in a game with such high rewards, the odds favor whoever stays in the game longest. Compound interest only works across time. Wealth only scales through persistence. And here's the final element. They don't do this in isolation. This is where the network principle circles back. The wealthy maintain relationships with people who will tell them the truth when they're wrong, who will encourage them when they want to quit, who will collaborate on solving the problem differently if the current approach isn't working. They've created a psychological and social infrastructure that supports persistence even when circumstances make it nearly impossible. Most of you will fail and then quit. You'll interpret the failure as evidence that this path isn't for you. The wealthy fail and then fail differently. They learn from what didn't work, adjust their approach, and try again. They do this repeatedly until something works. And when it finally does, the returns are so exponential that all the previous failures become irrelevant against the magnitude of eventual success. This is what wealth building looks like. Not a straight line, not constant forward momentum, but a trajectory that, viewed from far enough away, only moves upward because the person driving it refused to stop.